Well, hello. Welcome to RPG with DBJ. This is Third Pillar Thursday. Hopefully, I am coming through. I'm going to pause just a moment to make sure that everything is broadcasting correctly, and that you guys are, or people can see me out there in the YouTubeosphere, and hopefully there are no problems today. Let's see if we can. Very good. Thank you very much. Had some problems yesterday. I think YouTube was just glitching. I didn't get any strikes or anything. Apparently, thank you very much. Apparently, there seems to be some problems. So, we will be going back to the Monster Monday, Tips and Tricks Tuesday, and there was actually a subject that was brought up, or I guess a theme brought up by a dead man, and I thought I would actually expand on that a bit more, given it some thought, talking about world creating with more modern settings. And it brought to mind there are those of us in the RPG community. Sometimes we like to live in our little niches just because it's comfortable. For example, some people just absolutely positively will only play a medieval style game, not necessarily Dungeons and Dragons, but that theme, that setting, that time period. And so it made me think about some of the most popular settings that are not medieval. Some go backwards in time to more prehistoric, maybe ancient Rome and Greece. And then we get, if we go forward in time, we have Renaissance and Victorian and Western. So I thought, I wonder if we could delve into that as a theme. What are the best things about those time periods, why people love them, and kind of sell them to other people who are nah, I can't see myself playing a Western theme with 6 guns or playing Deadlands, or playing Eclipse Phase, or playing Stars Without Number, or just playing a modern setting like Dresden Files or something. Basically diving into the core essential values of what that makes. But since that seems to be a much bigger issue and something we could talk about, I thought, you know what? Yesterday didn't work out, but today is Third Pillar Thursday. So in the title, and you'll see in the thumbnail when it uploads, there is a movie that has gotten some traction and garnered some bizarre behavior by people, and that is the movie Bird Box. So if you haven't seen it and you don't want to be spoiled on it, I'm not going to give out all the details, but if you don't want to be spoiled on it, please do not watch this. Spoiler, don't watch it. Spoiler alert for Bird Box. Comes on in the United States. It's in Netflix, possibly the same thing, around the world, but what have you. So, okay. Now that we got that out the way. All right. Bird Box. Well, Bird Box seems to be the cheaper version of a movie that also has a similar theme to it, and that is A Quiet Place. All right. So in A Quiet Place, there was an enemy in it, monsters or something, and it had extremely sensitive hearing, so you had to remain extremely quiet. And in Bird Box, it takes the idea of sight. So something starts to spread around the world, and if you see it, it affects you. And so keeping your eyes closed or blocked, or your vision blocked from seeing this entity or entities or creatures or what have you, has debilitating effects. So Vince says, I think the main advantage of playing at such times would be that if you're familiar with it, it provides an opportunity to experience it yourself. And he's talking about going deeper into the modern or other time periods. But to give away the reveal of Bird Box, and I have a feeling that everybody understands what it is. there's some kind of creature or creatures, and if you see it, there's two things that can happen to you. If you are relatively, I'll say, I'll use the word innocent, but it's rather vague in that matter. You will see some sort of sight that draws such a reaction from you that you no longer wish to live. And the movie uses the idea that no one can really describe what it looks like, because the minute you see it, it drives you insane. Right now, the other effect is if you're a rather evil person, and it's very vague on this point too, that when you see it, it is such a beautiful, world-changing, soul disrupting thing that you want to force other people to see it. So you want to open their eyes so they see it, and then hilarity ensues as they kill themselves. And the idea is navigating this world without sight. And so, of course, this episode is Third Pillar Thursday. And Third Pillar, for those who don't know, I gotta go through all this again. Third pillar is the third pillar of gaming. So one pillar is combat, a second pillar is social interactions, and a third pillar is in exploration and using the environment. It is exploring the area. And in classic Dungeons and Dragons, one of the most common visual hazards, especially when it comes to enemies, is the Medusa, right? You take a look at the Medusa, you become petrified. There are other creatures in Dungeons and Dragons that have a similar thing, but essentially that's one of the closest creatures, but not the only one. And Vince says an RPG without sight would be incredibly hard to describe. And imagine trying to describe your game world where the PCs have to keep their eyes closed, or even not use light in say caverns or a castle or the sewers or something like that, because the light will draw something in. And so thinking largely about using the idea of if you see it, you'll, and air quotes, die, or at least suffer some super incredibly hard condition. It would be a challenge for a DM to describe it, and a challenge for the players to navigate it, because you're going to have to use your scent and sense of touch, and your hearing would be extremely sensitive to it. Tesla Ranger says, what's the difference between They Live and Bird Box? No, They Live, Rowdy Piper. Yeah, whatever. They Live is more like aliens hiding as human beings, and someone walking around with, you know, glasses that can see the truth, versus Bird Box, in which case it's an instant reaction. It's not like you can just see what it is and then explain it to other people. And you know, it's the minute you see it, innocent people just start killing themselves in whatever method is available to them at hand. So if you see it, you look out a window and you see it, if there's a pair of scissors, you're just going to stab yourself in the neck. If you look outside and you see it, there's a burning car, and it happens in the movie, you're just going to walk into the burning car and sit down and catch on fire. Like, it's not like turning into a zombie where it happens over minutes or hours or days. But also in the movie, there is a gentleman, a conspiracy theorist type of individual, who has these black chalk drawings of various Cthulhuoid creatures that are spread out, very H.R. Geiger type of creatures as well. And he has them from different cultures and from history and such, that gives you an idea of what it might look like. But what it looks like isn't important, because it's always individual. It's always specific to that individual. You see the thing that is most horrible to you, or most beautiful to you, or most world changing to you. Like, it's not what it looks like, it's what it happens to you when you see it. Yeah, Vince says, I mean, it could be interesting for single encounters, but not long term. That would be super distracting. And I absolutely agree with you, but fun to do, right? So, okay, let's take away the if you see it, you'll go insane part. Let's just deal with the if you see it, X will happen, right? So the most common one is the Medusa, right? If you see it, you become petrified. But we have other creatures that have a similar effect to it. For example, like the Umber Hulk is one. The Umber Hulk, if you see it, you get confused and you're like what the hell's going on, right? And there's the, I'm going to pronounce it wrong, Catabalus, Catabalus, the creature that lifts its head up out of the swamp. It's very reminiscent of like a water buffalo and a dinosaur. And if it kind of like lifts his eyes and looks at you, you die from seeing it. And Vince says, so the theme we're discussing is blocking senses, or do you want to use these with monsters? Well, this could literally be used all week, but I'm thinking of the theme of blocking the senses and then navigating or having hazards, or just thinking of an encounter where the senses are blocked. For example, the basilisk is I'm not thinking of the basilisk, but yes, the basilisk is another creature that has an effect of visual sight. Like if you see it, something bad will happen to you. You could create, imagine, if you will, glyphs, or a dangerous dungeon where if you see what's like paintings on the wall, maybe there's someone has a castle and there's like cursed paintings on the wall, or glyphs, or even some kind of infernal language, and if you take a look at it, it's so blasphemous, like something will happen to you. And you can replace insanity or petrification with some other effect. Yeah, that's the creature, but not that there is a proper pronunciation, but yes, Dead Man Storyteller always coming through. Catoblipus, Lepus, butcher. So anyway, I'm also imagining, like, what if an alchemical spill happens and it spreads, and you're like, it's like tear gas, right? And for just a few hours or something, like just opening your eyes is so painful, you start to cry, and there's like this green ooze pus just starts coming out of your eyes, and you're just like, oh no. And so just temporarily the PCs have to navigate out of this neighborhood where this alchemical spill is located. And then you could do this, of course, medieval, modern day, in the far future. And so then navigating around it, and if you have something coming after you, maybe there are constructs that are unaffected by it, or some sort of creature that is able to navigate through this, how to creating that complication of basically being blinded, or not necessarily being blinded, but that being blind is more beneficial than trying to see, which is different than just everyone is just blind. Vince says, I found a list, but it's for D&D 3.5. It's before that. I know it's at least second edition where that creature was in there. Vince says, what about that you're in a place that simply is super bright? And that's the opposite, right? What if you're, like, for example, in the far future, there might be a race of people that lives near like a super bright star. And, you know, even if you hold your hands up in front of your face, all you see are like the blood vessels and bones in your hand, because the light is so bright that it can pass through it. And side note, if you were ever a kid, you ever do the flashlight thing where you get a super bright flashlight and you put your hand over the flashlight and you can see the light passing through the edges of your flesh? Like, the light is so bright that it it's like the opposite of magical darkness. It just blinds everything. And so blocking your eyes might be necessary to do so. It could also be a strange thing where there may be creatures that are, and follow me on this, there are creatures that only exist once you perceive them. So, or they only react when they are perceived. So you go into another realm, or maybe there's something strange, some kind of strange, um, I don't know, like horrific thing, nightmarish creature. So you're in a in a realm where you feel like lizard skin against your leg, and then a moment later you feel like fur, and then maybe you feel like a weird slimy tentacle crossing your arm, but nothing happens to you. But the minute you perceive it, it becomes real and attacks you. And so being blind, you may have to walk through a dark chamber or navigate a nasty demonic city where you feel these things bumping into you and going around, or maybe they don't exist at all, but the minute you open your eyes, something random happens and you see it. Vince in the chat lists the creatures. I'm presuming creatures that have some sort of gaze type of abilities, or have gaze-like abilities, like the sea hag has the evil eye, vampires have dominate, the eye bite, Yuki Ona, paralyzing gaze. There's the Bodak, Chain Devil, Draco Lich, Elder Titan. I don't remember Elder Titan. Ether Gaunt, I'm not familiar with. The Fetch, I'm familiar with. The Gloom Ha Naga. Yeah, there's Nagas, Medusa, Rejkar, I've never heard of. The Sissitul, Throne Archon, Tulani, Eladrin, the Umber Hulk, yeah, the Yugoloth, the Marinoloth. Yeah, most of the Cthulhu-styled named ones tend to be like, if you see it, something bad happens to you. And it may be necessary for the PCs to, because I mean, we're talking 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, generally speaking, or Dungeons and Dragons in general. And for the most part, like it doesn't lend itself naturally to. It doesn't lend itself naturally to horror, right? Because the hero, I mean, basically, you're playing a hero, right? If you take damage, there's really not many things that happen to you to dissuade you from combat. There are no psychological implications unless you take rules like the short-term, long-term, indefinite madness tables, or you use some other type of madness rule in your game, like house rule or something. But I think it's still possible to do those things by taking away the senses, especially sight and sound, temporarily, just making it a hazard, making it something challenging. And I mean, who's to say a wizard didn't create like a magic mouth, and then there's like some kind of gaze ability that if you see it, something will happen to you, becoming paralyzed or magically held, or using any of the other conditions that exist in the back of the book, right? Restrained, unconscious, paralyzed, exhausted, blinded, of course, as well as charmed, and mixing and matching those things with some of the creatures. So, for example, instead of like the sea hag or the vampire having like a dominate, or like the evil eye, or a Medusa having petrification, you could have a Medusa, changing the name, of course, that if you see it, you become paralyzed, and the only thing, instead of being petrified, and when people come out of the paralysis, the only thing they see is like their greatest fear, right? They describe it as being burned alive, or they describe it as like falling from a cliff on the highest mountain and about to hit the ground, or they look at it as insects burrowing in their skin, and then when they get out of it, you're just like, oh my god, you know, and then they're like covered with sweat. And it could be just a narrative thing. It could just simply be paralysis, and no one knows exactly what this quote unquote creature looks like, because the only thing they've seen is their greatest fear. And so when they come out of it, they have to find clues to find out what it is. Is it slithering? Is it an insectoid? Is it humanoid? And find it without actually seeing it. And maybe some of the clues are strange, like maybe they see a slime trail, and then the slime trail turns into footsteps, like humanoid footsteps, and then maybe those footsteps turn into like insectoid, you know, skittering or something, like a centipede. And it's like, what the hell does this thing look like? Vince says you could also block one of the non-common senses humans have, like touch or smell, which although not very commonly used as a threat, it very well could be used as a threat in terms of not being able to smell something burning, not being able to smell acid or smell death. Sense of touch is funky too, because you know, especially if you ever have a situation where like you fall asleep and your hand, you fall asleep and you fall asleep on your arm in a really funky way, and you wake up and your arm has going numb. And just before you get that tingle, when the blood rushes into it, you can't feel anything in it. So you might drop things like you may drop your thieves tool or your sword or your magic focus or your holy symbol, right? You may not be able to hold on to a cliff edge because you could see your hands moving, trying to do things, but you don't feel what they're doing, especially if you're trying to like reach into a pocket or a backpack or a pouch to get something. You have no idea what you've reached into because you can't feel it. And also not being able to find out how much damage you've taken. Maybe you've gotten a creature bites you on the leg and you don't realize it, or you get hit from behind. And Vince makes a couple of examples like pressure, itching, and itches. Yes, that's different from touch. Thermal perception, such as hot and cold. He says proprioception, where your body parts are. Tension, which is muscle tension. Or either nociception or nocioception. Nociception, which is pain. There's a ton of other ones too. Not being able to detect distances, things like that, especially hot and cold. Like when I'm sure, because I'm getting to that age, right, where you get older and, you know, a lot of elderly people are like, I'm hot, I'm cold. And you're sitting around like, boy, this person's turned the heat up, or man, they don't have the heat on at all. Like what's wrong with them? And as you start not being able to tell whether things are hot or cold, or you get an itch and you can't really figure out where it's at. And insects that try to like burrow into your body and you can't tell that they're doing it, could be a thing as well. And also, I like the idea of putting it in the hands of the players. Like, for example, using Bird Box as an example, the people specifically like covered the windows of their car, covered the windows of buildings, wore blindfolds across their eyes. Now, mind you, whatever this entity was that came out, it didn't seem as if they were specifically like physically attacking people, right? It was all a matter of the creature just being seen by things. Vince equals equilibrioception for balance and acceleration of gravity. Stretch, which would be lung, bladder, stomach, internal organs. The effect of like having consumed something or something inside of your body, like having an infestation of sorts, being poisoned and not feeling it. Chemoreceptors, such as detect poison used for vomiting, which I kind of, all these kind of have that link together. Thirst, hunger, magnetoception for like magnetic fields, time. Yeah, there's so many things you could alter or block, or maybe someone needs to block those perceptions to prevent harm to themselves. for some reason, I just thought of the idea of if you perceive something, there's a danger if you perceive it, and that the danger is in the perception of it, not in the real danger is perceiving it, not in the preventing yourself from perceiving this thing, right? And because I think it would be really odd to have like each PC see something and each of them is fighting something different, but they're fighting the same creatures. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just find that, and that's what made me think about this subject about like blocking the senses and like wearing blindfolds or having to make a loud noise or clatter or something like that. Vincent says, imagine having no sense of thirst or hunger anymore and you collapse, which would, that could be a weird in, because, you know, like 5th edition has a lot of easy buttons. They have like create food and water, Goodberry, Leomund's tiny hut for survival outside. Plus you have the Outlander and Ranger, which automatically find food and things. But if you can't feel yourself getting hungry or thirsty or feeling the effects of starvation, then there would be no imperative for you to use those spell effects until it happens. And then you would have to like literally sit down and go, okay, guys, listen, we need to eat. I know you don't feel hungry, but we need to eat here and drink, or we need to purify this water before we drink it out of this pool, even though it looks clear, because we don't know it's poisoned. And yes, we don't even know what it tastes like. You know, we can't taste it, whether it's moldy or something like that. So we have to consciously do this in this new island we went to or something of that nature. Not being able to balance anymore and getting nauseated all the time would be a thing, especially for those extremely athletic and acrobatic characters that need to scamper or climb over materials. You could have like an MC Escher-esh style of realm of chaos, and it could be throwing your balance off, or you could be zero gravity or very low gravity. From what I understand, they say that in zero gravity, it's hard to get used to because your brain associates it with falling, and the falling makes you nauseated. So a lot of people who have tried to adapt themselves to low gravity or zero gravity become nauseated at first, like in an airplane that's starting to dive, and you have that zero tension on your body. You're falling at the same rate as the thing that's falling, and you start to float. That's how they can do those live action zero gravity scenes in airplanes. They do it in a giant airplane, and it just starts to dive towards the earth at the same rate as everything falling. And it could be that you have to close your eyes or do something else to block your senses so that it doesn't look like the walls you're climbing are flipping upside down or something like that. Vince goes on, you feel no hot or cold anymore, so you get frostbite or heat stroke all the time. It says, what about getting more senses you're not used to? Suddenly you feel magnetic fields super strongly, or you can see all kinds of invisible energies all the time. There was, I believe it's 3.x, where if you use detect magic, if you use detect magic, and it might have been one of the detect alignment spells, that if something was strong, you would get overwhelmed by it if you opened your senses to it. And narratively, I've always liked the idea of, especially when detect magic became more of a cantrip, that if you use detect magic against something that was very powerful or some otherworldly creature, like it would overwhelm your senses, and like, you know, it would be like no one else sees this, like the fighters in the group, like, what's going on, you know? It's the Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I detect evil, so I start getting stomach cramps. There's vampires, so, you know, you start getting the stomach cramp thing. I like that idea because you can give information to the players based on what's going on around them, because only one or only a few of the PCs get to feel it. And then at the same time, you could also make it debilitating as well if you want to go there. and that might give a clue as to how powerful this other thing is. So maybe some of the fiendish minions, you know, you detect magic and it's like no big deal, or detect alignment on them, it's like whatever. But then all of a sudden, the same individual that can detect them gets overwhelmed. The paladin's senses get overwhelmed, and he goes blind or deaf, or you know, overcome with racking pain or something. You know, starts to vomit or whatever, and then the paladin's like, "Holy, this." We better watch out, because if this thing could do that to me just simply by its being near its presence, opening myself to its presence, then it must have, i.e. its a CR rating might be extremely high, right? Vince says they had this in Overlord. The caster used detect magic on the main character, immediately vomited. Yeah, and I mean, in a way, that's very story driven. I mean, you could have it could have a mechanical effect, but I also like the idea of it being very story driven as well, right? You could even have the same effect for a warlock, right? A warlock goes to petition their patron, and the patron may not be very nice about it, and so grants them their spells or abilities or something like that, and it could be extremely painful when it happens. It could be an extremely nightmarish effect, or something that happens to them overnight or in their sleep, or maybe it's not even something anyone else can perceive except only them, and maybe they get these scars on their body, or they breathe out and something dark and ominous breathes out of their mouth, or grabs them by their eyes and holds their eyes open as power flows into it, or any number of things could happen just because of their ability to sense something that other people can't. You could also have a challenge. This is another strange challenge where the PCs are maybe encountering a room where this could be a trap, where only certain PCs can see certain dangers that are dangerous to them, but not dangerous to other people. So maybe the rogue sees wolves, the fighter sees giants, the mage sees lizards, and the cleric sees constructs, right? And it could be that they're all fighting these things in the same room, and the PC's fighting like the wolves, but the other PCs don't see it, and they're trying to warn their allies, like, watch out, it's coming after you. But the fact of the matter is they're only seeing what they can see. Well, Vince says in Numenera there's a focus called Sees the Unseen, and its ability to see invisible all the time. As a GM, I would make small invisible but harmless creatures and plants show up everywhere. Yeah, that's the thing, right? If you can see something that is normally invisible to you, you're just like, oh, and you go up to it, you may interact with it, you may run from it, you may warn other people to dodge behind something, and everyone's just like, why? I don't get it. And you're just like, don't you see it? It's sitting right there in front of you. You're like, no, it isn't. And if they walk right through it, not being able to see it, that would be kind of strange. Vince says, what about this episode for Twilight Zone where a guy sees a gremlin ripping the wing of the plane, ripping the wing of the plane to shreds, only he can see it? Yeah, William Shatner. Yeah, that's the thing, right? Like, if you're the only one that can perceive it, as in they live, right? You're the only one that can see the danger, and everyone else is like, no, it's explained away with something. It could be just it could be you're perceiving, like the gremlin idea could be that the plane is in danger of falling out of the sky, and you're seeing what's going to happen just before that action happens. Yeah, a normal paranoid PC will sees dangers regardless, right? Yeah, and that would be a very strange thing too, if the PCs are like, they're the only ones that can see the danger and no one else believes them. What's the game? Tales from the Loop. In Tales from the Loop, that's where you play children and you basically ride your bikes around, similar to Kids on Bikes. But in Tales from the Loop, they specifically say that adults specifically do not believe the children in this setting, and only the kids are the ones that are able to make the challenges to solve the situation that happens in whatever setting you're thinking of in Tales from the Loop. And it could be that the parents just don't see what's going on. So there could be like a monster that's rampaging around, and the parents are blaming the kids for causing all this harm and damage to cars and violence. But even with the creature coming into the house and like standing behind the parents, and the kids are like, watch out. You know, the parents are just like, you're crazy. You're on opioids. What the hell's going on with you? Um, yeah, Vince says, but you can use it against him. Suddenly, he can't relax anymore if he's always paranoid, and that could be a twist on characters that are very super highly skilled or have high attributes or powers that grant them the sight beyond sight, right? Where the character who has a perception of like plus 28, right, in fifth edition could be perceiving so many things that they can't discern the thing that they should ignore. They're just, all you're doing is just giving them tons and tons of things they keep seeing. And then it's up to them to have to discern what is the threat, what's the most important thing to see, because they could be seeing things like they're seeing people pick their nose, they're seeing forks scrape against plates, they're seeing cats rubbing against people's legs, they're seeing people drop a few copper pieces by accident into the mud, they're seeing someone sneezing, you know, or whatever. They're seeing a small child like tugging at their mom's skirt. Like they're seeing all these things, but is it important to see it? You know, you're like a human being standing in a party and using their senses to pick out the conversation around them. Having the ability to block out certain things so you can focus in on one or only a few people talking is actually just as important as being able to hear an entire conversation. It's like doing live streams. When you do live stream panel and there's like you can't have three people talking at the same time because the audio picks up all of the audio equally, as opposed to someone participating in it and having to pause so the other person can speak, because when all the audio is mixed together, it just becomes a hodgepodge. Your brain cannot separate out one audio from the other. There's also a small but obscure game from John Wick called Cats, where cats defend their owners from invisible creatures. And I'm thinking you're definitely talking about John Wick, the writer, not John Wick, the killer. Although that would be pretty interesting if he created that as well. But no. Yeah, you could play in a role-playing game where you're playing cats that defend their owners from invisible creatures. Or what's the other one? Mouse Guard. Mouse Guard's another one where you could do that, where people don't perceive something but only you can. I even use that as an example for there's a pay what you want. It's called Arcane Ancestry, and it's just basically random tables for flavoring your wizards and sorcerers and warlocks and things like that. And one of the ideas was that when you use your magical abilities, creatures no one else can see come hunting after you. They're like hunters, and it could be like hounds or like displacer beasts, whatever you want. Trolls, doesn't matter what the creature is. It's just that every time you use your magical abilities or the more powerful abilities you use, they're able to triangulate your location and come after you and hunt you down. And they could be coming into cities or coming across woodland areas, the wastelands or what have you, and they could hunt you down as a spellcaster or maybe even a psionicist or something in your setting. But the people around, maybe they're just completely immaterial. People don't see them, or maybe they are physical, but people just feel them as wind or gravity, or perceive them as accidents, like a ladder falls over or a barrel rolls down the street, or something comes unloose from a cart or a pickup truck or something of that nature. Legend of the Spiderwigs, question mark. I don't know what the game is, but I can imagine that would be kind of cool, playing like, you could play like cats, and maybe even a game where you play like cats and mice and raccoons or something. Like, what's the movie? Over the Hedge. where you can play small animals and the human beings don't have any idea what's going on. But I still like the idea, the larger idea of the movie Bird Box, where just seeing or not having an idea of what it is that you shouldn't perceive, or again, it could be random, that if you perceive it, it becomes real. So you could make, for example, in a land of chaos, maybe the PCs go into the abyss, and one of the levels of the abyss, you have like a random table of like CR7 creatures, or like they're CR like 4 through 10 or something. And if you take a look at it, you roll randomly and it becomes that creature. If you close your eyes and open your eyes again, it might be something different, or it might even be something different for each PC, but they're all fighting the same creature. So one PC might get grabbed by its tentacles because they're looking at a tentacle creature, while another PC sees like a hairy giant like yeti styled creature or bugbear, and so they get clawed or bitten. And yet a third PC sees like a construct or something, or an ooze. And that would be really bizarre to fight the same creature, but it looks different and acts different for each person, which would be kind of weird, especially if it had wings for one PC but had tunneling for another creature. That would be kind of bizarre. I don't know if that would work exactly, but yeah. Spider Wicks, Legend of the Spider Wicks. And Vince says a weird guy made a book about them, and they had to find methods to see them and fight them with salt and ketchup and the like. That's I like. See, I like stuff like that. You know, using plates and ketchup, knocking over the ketchup and mayonnaise, and like maybe picking up a fork and using that as a weapon or something like that. Or if you're a cat, you'd probably have to knock over maybe some vegetable oil, get them to slip and fall, maybe. But anyway, I just wanted to like to round out this week, because I think it would be better for us to go over. Oh yeah, Vince says, what if the PCs would see each other as monsters? A classic episode of the animated series, Justice League. Don't know if it was Justice League Unlimited or one of the Justice League. I'm sure you could do some Google foo, where Wonder Woman and Superman see each other as demons. And so like Wonder Woman's lasso looks like a demonic tail or tongue. And then Superman's heat vision is like a fire breath from the demon to Wonder Woman, and they start fighting each other toe to toe. Shows how tough Wonder Woman is. But yeah, they ended up having to figure that out. Vince says, I did this one in a chat RPG where 2 players only communicated through me, the GM. Yeah, that would be pretty interesting to reflavor what another PC is doing as a monster. Like the rogue sneaks into a room and then yells back to the players, oh, everything's clear. Player walks into the room and sees a demon in the room, starts fighting the demon, and the demon starts moving around quickly. And then the rogue in the room is like, oh, everything's clear. You call for your ally. Your ally walks in the room, and he's like a big giant troll with like, whose skin is tough. And he's like, well, of course, maybe that's the fighter or the barbarian or something, and having to describe what's going on. And of course, they can't speak to each other because the language is all twisted and mangled and stuff. And they're like, no, stop, I'm going to defeat you, demon, as the paladin says that. But really what the other PC is seeing, like the demon pull out like a flaming whip and try to attack the character instead of his like sword of light or something like that. Yeah, that would be you would have to have players really buy into that. Or be very sneaky with the chat, to use like the private messaging. I know Zoom does that really well, where you can you can actually literally just click on their image and just private chat someone, or send them an image, or tell them something. It's also the idea of the doppelganger knocking out a PC, and then that PC becomes a doppelganger, and just like, private messaging them and going, listen, I got, sorry to tell you, but your character was just knocked out and rolled into a closet, and B, your character now is a doppelganger, right? Some players can go for that. Some players are just like, that sucks. You didn't even give me a roll, Oh, you can do that in Roll20 as well. That's right. Roll20 has a private messaging within the group as you play, to just send them. You can send them maps and pictures and things like that. Fantasy Grounds does that as well. Fantasy Grounds has the clickable send information, especially if you have like PCs that are wizards or very intelligent. The bards who know certain specific information, you can send it to them, and then they can then disseminate it to the players. So yeah, I didn't want to go too deep into it, but I did want to like just slow down the world building towards the end of this week, so we can go into like, I find that the other technological settings are bigger scope than I thought they would be, and almost like a salesmanship thing. I think we could do like, okay, classic American Wild West. Like, why would you play in that? To sell it for somebody who doesn't like it, and for people who do love it, like, why would you even bother doing that? So anyway, guys, I thought I'd talk a little bit about Bird Box. Excuse me. Ooh, wow, snorted on that one. A Quiet Place, and just being able to use the senses. That would be a big challenge for GM or DM to a storyteller to really describe their world without visual connections to it. Describing the world with like, this is what you feel. You feel the table as you're walking. You feel the grass against your legs. Your knee bumps into a chair. There's a tapestry on the wall. You feel the door and the lock, but you feel the door and the doorknob, but the doorknob's not to the right, it's to the left. You feel the hinges. Yes, you feel the door. The door feels warm. There's a little bit of air coming under the bottom of it. Maybe there's smoke. Maybe you feel a breeze through a open window, but you can't see it or something, like, right? That would be very interesting. Or even having a creature like the Medusa that, basically is the penultimate creature you should not look at because it will turn you into stone, right? The ultimate one is any of the Cthulhu creatures. If you take a look at this, it is that which should not be seen. The name that should not be said, the creature that should not be created. And Vince says would be an interesting GM challenge. And you know what? For those of us, not myself, but I'm saying inclusively, for people who want to play role-playing games that have, and I'm going to call them handicaps, who have certain difficulties, whether it's through language, through sight, through hearing, through tactile things, whether due to problems with their limbs or something like that, that would be pretty interesting to learn to accommodate that individual by creating a situation that actually allows them to shine, and someone like me to be at a loss. There is a movie, and I think it's called Blindness, where some kind of a form of disease spread around that basically turned everyone blind. And what happened in the movie is there was one individual, for whatever reason, didn't become blind. And she ends up getting, like, she's horrified by what people do in this world of where everyone turns blind. But what happens is someone turns pretty evil, who was a gentleman who was already blind, because he had the advantage in a world where everyone is blind. A blind man has the advantage because he already could navigate. And there's like all kinds of nasty things that happen. This woman tries to like keep everybody clean and everything, but no one, people are like, crapping in corners and just doing all kinds of like nasty things. It's a pretty dark movie. And over time, like, everyone's trying to like walk along by holding on each other's shoulders. And a simple accident, someone tripped and fell, and City of the Blind, is that what it's called? Something like that. Man, it's pretty nasty. And then someone trips and falls, loses track of the person that was literally 3 feet away from them, and they just start wandering off in a different direction. And you're just like, what the hell? Like, they're right there. You know, you just yell out, you know, to the other person. And it's pretty nasty. So, yeah, I think you could have a lot of fun with visual creatures that have a visual attack, right? The PCs that are like, well, I'm just going to block my eyes. And I'm like, okay, well, you have to consciously take the blinded condition to not be affected by this other horrible condition, which would just be really strange. You could take an Umber Hulk and maybe this creature, whether like an Umber Hulk or a basilisk or something like that, is relatively harmless, but when it sees things or people see it, when people see it, that's where the danger comes from. Maybe it just wants to eat trash, or it's eating like livestock, or it ends up getting pushed into a city or something. And when people see it, they go insane. Maybe they go berserk. Maybe it has different effects. Maybe it polymorphs people. You could have a random table. Maybe it comes from the abyss, and every time someone sees it, it has a different effect. You know, at one time, maybe it petrifies someone, then polymorphs someone else, and then maybe makes someone teleport, you know, 500 feet away, or becomes ethereal temporarily, or something like that. Like, you could have a randomized table, or maybe if you see it, you suffer an attack, like almost like a beholder attack, but only if you see it, it's a beholder, but if you don't see it, it's like harmless. It's kind of strange as well. Vince says, what about a monster that's completely unsensible until you close your eyes, and then you can at least hear and smell it? That's a thing too, right? It's if you don't see it, it doesn't exist. It could be a literal creature out of nightmare, so that when you close your eyes, like the kid who's afraid of the boogeyman under the bed, once you close your eyes, you can hear it scratching or like pulling at the covers. But once you open your eyes, something happens to it. Yeah, Deadman. Yeah, the Catoblipus, butchering the name again, but yeah, that's the creature that just basically, I mean, it's pretty harmless, right? I mean, ostensibly, it's just like an animalistic creature, but when he lifts his head out of the swamp and you see it, you die. Cockatrice might be, well, it's not visual. It's pretty much like if it pecks you, you become petrified, but I mean, you could throw it in that same category. Like, yes, it's more or less related to something that has to do with corruption, but in general, like, a cockatrice might be like wandering around aimlessly until you like see it, and then it just becomes like, really bizarre. Vince says in Naruto, some of the techniques only work through the eyes. Dojutsu, and some only works if you look at the user, that that are like hallucinations, maybe a powerful illusionist tricks only if you look at them. I think you covered about a quarter of pronunciation. I haven't quite murdered the pronunciation yet. I'm still trying. Thanks, Deadman. I'm sorry, Deadman. I know it's probably Deadman, but whatever. I like Deadman, the storyteller. You got to have that like announcer voice with it too. It just makes me think of that. So there could be there was a series of books, ninja books that I was reading, where there were people who practice dojutsu, which is like they could hypnotize people or get them to do things. They could get them to glance away, and that's how ninjas were able to hide in people's periphery, by getting people to glance in a different direction. And they could stand. I know it's kind of strange, but they could stand in people's blind spots. Um, that could be a strange way to explain invisibility, right? Like it's not just you bending light, but it could be that people, if they look at you, they see something else. That's they see something else, not illusion, like you don't look like a barrel, but their mind thinks of something else as you move past them invisibly. Um, uh, uh, Vince goes on to correct, like that's genjutsu. Dojutsu is specifically eye techniques, while genjutsu are hypnotism and illusions. And yeah, I mean, I think playing with people's, yeah, Tesla Ranger says situational blindness, right? I think there's a way you could play with it, just to throw something strange at your player characters if you want to, or player characters that are involved in a situation where if you're, I don't know, climbing up a cliffside and then there's some kind of like strange creatures, like okay, for example, let's say there's harpies or sirens, and if you hear their sound, because we're talking about situational blindness, but the same thing could be used for any of the senses. If you Sailors had to cover their ears so they are not drawn by the sounds of the sirens to make them jump into the water and drown, but then they can't hear dangers from other things, maybe someone boarding the ship or about warning that they might hit an iceberg or something like that. Vince goes on to say, in World of Darkness, the obfuscate techniques make it so that people just ignore you. Yeah, there's one of the lower level obfuscate abilities was like, if you stand still and take no actions, people just flow around you. They ignore you. Like maybe they don't even think of you, but if they were, I would just think people would think you were a pole or a trash can, or they basically flow around you without consciously thinking of why they're doing it. And that was a very early obfuscate technique where basically you could just stand still in a crowd, and that's a classic vampire technique, right? Where you have the enemy is like very persuasive or hypnotic, that finds that one person in the crowd who can see them, and everyone else is just like going about their business. They're going to work, they're rushing, but they never bump into that individual. Vince says, which could be superior to invisibility because they won't bump into you, they ignore you passively. Well, that's because the idea was that you couldn't take any actions. You couldn't move and then do something. Like if you started to move, someone might then bump into your chest and go like, oh, excuse me, without realizing that you just appeared in front of them. Or like you could stand in the middle of a street and traffic would flow around you until you started walking, and then people would beep their horn like, hey buddy, get out of the street, what are you doing? Yeah, so anyway, I just, for me, third pillar exploration to me is about finding little challenges, not making a whole game setting where everyone's blind. I don't mean that, but I'm saying like creating different challenges where the PCs or even the GM or everybody together has to think outside the box, where it's just like, like what? That would be different. PCs are climbing a cliff. There's harpies that are trying to charm the PCs to let go. So the PCs now have to figure out a way to make enough noise, maybe to drown out the hypnotic sound, or maybe the PCs have to stop and pause and put something in their ears, or someone uses like prestidigitation or thaumaturgy. I think it's thaumaturgy, to maybe raise their voice to create a loud sound, or maybe someone uses like a thunder spell to do something. But if they use a thunder spell, it might cause an avalanche because there's like snow above their heads, right? You could create these challenges. For me, it's the ultimate idea of creating a puzzle that doesn't have an answer that either you as the GM or the players automatically know. There's not one way to get out of it. So anyway, tomorrow's going to be Future Friday. We're going to do something science fiction, and then Monday we're going to go into Dead Men, the Storytellers theme of world building with technology. And not necessarily like cyberpunk. I'm talking about different settings, Renaissance, Victorian, Wild West. What are some others I thought of course, modern day, alternate modern day. So you have like today, modern day, without magic, without psionics, without any of that stuff. There's alternate modern day, which is like the movie Bright, which is like Dresden Files, where we have our modern day and it's parallel to magic or parallel with psionics or something else exists in it. Then we have near future like cyberpunk, Shadowrun. Then we have like far future, Star Trek, Star Wars, Eclipse Phase, one of my favorites, Stars Without Number, Traveler, that kind of thing. And so we can talk about like selling it, like why would you do it? What kind of adventures can you do in it that are different than other adventures? And I'm sure there's some that I'm absolutely missing, like World War I and World War II type of, you know, settings, and blending those with world creation, even with using like 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons and things like that. So guys, thank you for joining me. This is RPG with DBJ. You're going to notice that I changed, instead of seeing The Lich, which is one of our releases from Critical Hit Publishing, we have a new release. It's $1. It's a PDF. It's part of our Adventure Keys tradition of releasing something on the D6th and the D20th. This one is called Behind Enemy Lines. And I'm going to say goodbye. Babe.
Bye, baby.
Bye. Love you.
4:30, please.
Absolutely.
Oh, my.
Ooh, what happened?
Look.
Well, I can't.
Oh, it's snowing and everything out
Are you serious? Oh.
Covered.
All right, babe. Be careful. Yeah, saying goodbye to the wife. We've got snow outside. We had a ton of rain yesterday, wiped away all the snow, and then came in. So, guys, I know a lot of you who have to go, or whatever. I'm going to do one last thing. I'm going to do a screen share on our Adventure Keys, which is Behind Enemy Lines. So anyway, if you guys have to go right on ahead. This is just me, a little self-promotion, but whatever. I mean, hell, it's my own shit. I hope YouTube doesn't ding me on trying to share my own crap. But whatever, who knows? They might do that. But anyway, we're still writing. We're still doing our thing. Let's click the screen share button. Share entire screen. And there we go. Let's increase the size of this. And so I'm just going to page through this a little bit while I talk to you guys. Right now, I cannot see the chat, but this is our adventure key Behind Enemy Lines right here. Ooh, Alex did a pretty good job with this because I know he uses a lot of free artwork and materials and stuff, and he does a really good job blending them together. That seems to be that is our artistic style. It's kind of watercolor / oil painting, and so yeah. But and of course we got our credits. It's only a couple of pages long. How to use this book? It's basically like a one-shot adventure. And it explains what's in it: trappings, threats, locations, hooks and goals, challenges, characters. We put at least 3 of each in there so you can mix and match what you want to insert into it. And then if you want to revisit it and use it again and again. So the basic storyline behind this, there's always a little blurb here. The noxious haze hanging over the battlefield smells of blood, metal, and waste. Black, oily smoke rises in thick clouds from giant fire pits fueled by alchemical concoctions and the bodies of the dead. Somewhere in the distance, an eruption of purple eldritch light fills the sky. The clash of steel, the screams of rage, and the wails of the dying are everywhere. The din is almost unbearable. And so this is essentially like there's a huge battle going on, and these are some of the things that are you could place into a one shot that you know, basically just giving your character something to do. There's goals, for example, like It's the Only Way. There's Operation Decoy, where the with a couple of rules where the PCs have to pretend that they're losing a battle to draw away the enemy. There's promotion where they end up as the highest ranking individuals in this particular encounter. Maybe we have some NPCs that you can use for this and others. So in a way, by collecting each of these adventure keys, you have yourself some extra NPCs you can use. It's family. Alith, there's another one. There's a family. There's Lord Commander Gregor Handrex V. There's some trappings, and trappings are like objects or persons, places, things, materials in the location, like such as a divine obelisk, a message. There's a war machine. We also include some, try to include like stat blocks for different creatures. For example, there's during threats, there's like berserkers, and we have the stat block for that, so you don't really have to look that up. There's boulders being thrown by siege weapons. There's a stat block for the Juggernaut, which is basically a super giant, construct machine belching out steam. You can describe how it is, whether it's like run by alchemical machines or the dead are pushed into it. It goes into like, it's got fire absorption, it's got a slam attack, it's got jets of steam. There's also changes, so you can change what the environment is like heavy fog, PTSD, and using that as a challenge, and vermin, of course, and then we have the bonus, which are the fates of war. I kind of like this. Side note, I actually wrote it. And it's basically like there's a 1 in 6 chance that a random event will occur in a zone near a character. You can increase the randomness, and each of these events are something that might happen randomly in battle, such as like an aggravated wound. Something is blood slick, you get bull rushed, maybe your leg gets grabbed by a wounded combatant, loss of friends in the battle, entombed by piles of dead, a dead weight falls against you. It says something like this could be a wounded mount, a siege machine, or a broken cart. Entrails, you trip over the intestines of a severed corpse. Where's some more? There's nightmare image, sprays of blood in the face, trampled. Screams of the dying, maybe you're randomly hit by something that's just flying through the air. Shield or weapon armor is damaged. You're winded, all those kind of things. So, and then we go down here with some examples of machines of war, and some examples of an onagar, a ballista, catapult, and then of course we have ourselves. I like this image of this old catapult because it's not like spring loaded. You see these people like pulling on it. Of course, it has a little bit of weight to it, but the onagar has there's the spring loading twist right there. So let me stop sharing this. All right, so guys, there we're back into the chat. There we go. Talks bollocks. DBJ, I wish you had time to do book reading. I like how you go into it when you're reading that first paragraph. Made me want to hear more. Dude, that's just me being over dramatic, right? Like sometimes it's just role playing, like DMing and GMing. You just have to modify your voice. Like sometimes if you really want to make something sound sinister and dramatic, you might want to lower your voice and slow it down, and then you bring people in, right? Because if you slow down and lower your voice, it almost makes your PCs want to lean in a little bit more, like what is he about to talk about, right? And then on the other hand, if you get really excited and you speed up things, it's like, okay, all right, you have to hurry up and make your attack roll. There's creatures flying around. The harpy's about to attack you. The kobolds are flying on the albino bats. What are you going to do? The gnolls are throwing javelins at you from the upper ridge. And then you got different people. When you get excited, if you have that energy, hopefully other people are going to feel that energy from you. So it's just a GM trick. It's not, I've never had acting classes per se, but sometimes it's just a matter of, it's just a tool, or just one more tool in a toolbox. So, and giving people energy and feeding off of that energy is cool. Like if you told me, man, my character's gonna hit that guy with an axe, I'm going to respond to you. Sweet. Okay, your axe cleaves through that guy's jaw, man. Dude, tell me how you take out the goblin. And then if you go into a description and you tell me, okay, my axe cleaves deep into his chest, and it's almost as if his eyes doesn't realize like he's dead. And I take my foot and I kick his body off of my bloody axe, and the green blood sprays everywhere. And I yell out in rage, and I look for my next enemy. And I'm like, sweet, okay, so your character, guys, you see him, he pulls his axe out of this goblin's body and kicks him aside, and he just yells out in rage, oh, and the other goblins are like scared to see him. What do you do? And it's like me reinforcing the coolness of what you're doing. Me as a game master, I'm trying to create that energy for the next guy. Maybe I'll probably do that for Tips and Tricks Tuesday. I could probably do that, not next week, but the week after, just like how one of a number of tools in your toolbox as a game master or DM. And if you listen to people who are really good game masters, they'll do that kind of thing, because after the battle's over, all of a sudden, you guys look around. PC's the cleric and the barbarian. Your heart rate's coming down. You're breathing heavy. The fog is thick. It starts to move in. Off in the distance, you hear the call of a raven. The dead bodies are there. The steam is rising from their bodies as their warmth leaves them in this cold, frigid landscape. You look around, you know what I mean? Like that's what you want to do. You want to create an atmosphere. When it's slow, you want to make it ominous. If it's horrible, you want to make it sound like you don't even want to be there, that there's danger lurking around the corners, right? At any moment. If there's a lot of action, you want to be real quick. Come on, make a decision. Come on. Let's go for it. Man, that's cool. You also want to reinforce, not only make things hard for players, but when they do something cool, not to get mad that they killed your enemies, but like that's their whole point, right? You're not going to run out of bad guys, right? If they kill your troll in like 2 rounds, so what? They killed them. That's sweet. And describing it, and then lastly, building on what people do to create that environment. Don't just go, oh, wizard, you just cast a fireball, roll some damage, you do 18 points of damage. Next. No, you cast a fireball. You feel the oxygen in the room start to suck into this ball of fire. It flies through the air. If someone gets their hair singed, it explodes. Bodies go flying everywhere. Things get engulfed in flames. Now there's a big black spot of like oily residue from the dead bodies. There's some fire clinging to something. Maybe a tapestry burns and falls off the wall. There should be ramifications for what people do, and building on those ramifications allows it to build into a greater story. So thanks, Dogs Bollocks, for doing that and letting me describe myself. So guys, thank you very much for joining me. I am DBJ. This is RPG with DBJ. There will be more on the way. We're going to talk about world building with technology next week, just because Deadman, the storyteller, brought it up. So yeah, and Dogs Bollocks, thank you for being enthusiastic in joining into the RPG realm, and thank you for letting me be one of those individuals that like gets you excited for it. So yeah, believe me, I'm nowhere near one of the best, but I learn from the best. I'm an old dude, but I can always learn something more. So not a problem at all, dogs, man. Yeah. All right, dog. I will see you guys later. Thanks for joining me. I'm out.